The night she hired a new driver, Samantha Cole thought she was in control. She had no idea the quiet man behind the wheel knew every secret she tried to hide. And when he finally stopped the car outside his own mansion, the woman who tested everyone realized she'd just been tested herself. The late morning sun glittered on the glass facade of Cole Mason, the fashion house that had turned Samantha Cole into both a headline and a mystery. Cameras flashed when she stepped from the revolving doors, a vision in cream silk and mirrored sunglasses. She smiled for no one in particular, the same rehearsed smile that had sold perfume and dreams across continents. But behind that gloss lived a restlessness she couldn't name, something between boredom and a quiet dare to the world to surprise her. A new driver waited at the curb, standing beside a black town car polished to liquid shine. He was tall, plain-clothed, posture straight. "Daniel Reed," he said when she approached, voice measured, eyes steady. No fawning, no nervous chatter. Samantha tilted her head, half amused. "You look more like security than a chauffeur." "Maybe that's safer," he replied, opening the door without breaking eye contact. The confidence in that small act unsettled her. She slid into the back seat, perfume mingling with new car leather, and watched him through the reflection in the glass partition. He drove smoothly, no wasted movement, no glance toward her mirror poses. Most men either tried to impress or to vanish. Daniel did neither. "So, Daniel Reed," she began, tone light. "How long have you been driving?" "Long enough." "That sounds mysterious." "Only if you need it to be." The reply made her smile fade for a fraction of a second. She shifted topics, testing again, asking him to detour through congested downtown streets, requesting coffee from a cafe with no drive-through, watching if he would sigh. He didn't. Every obstacle seemed to fall quietly into order around him. At a red light, she studied his hands, strong, unhurried, a faint scar crossing the knuckle. Not the manicure of a professional driver, more like a man who had built or broken things once. When their eyes met in the mirror, she felt an unfamiliar jolt, as if he'd seen past her glossy disguise to the girl she'd hidden under designer armor. "Most people flinch when I change plans," she said. "You don't?" "I'm paid to arrive," he answered. "Not to complain." "Arrive where?" He smiled once. Not as an employee, but as someone who already knew her secret, whatever it was she kept locked behind expensive laughter. The light turned green. The car eased forward, and for the first time in months, she didn't check her phone or email. She just watched the city blur by while the quiet man up front guided her through traffic as if he'd been driving her all her life. Something about that calm unnerved her. Beneath his stillness, she sensed power. Not ambition, but control. And somewhere inside, a voice whispered that hiring him had not been her choice at all. It was simply her turn in whatever test had just begun. By late afternoon, the sky outside her office had turned a pale shade of gold, and Samantha Cole was still thinking about the man behind the wheel. She'd spent the entire day half listening to presentations, her mind circling back to the quiet driver who never looked surprised, never seemed impressed. She told herself it was curiosity, nothing more. Yet, when she saw the town car waiting below, a flicker of something like anticipation stirred in her chest. Daniel stood by the car door as if he'd known the exact second she'd appear. He didn't ask about her day, didn't rush forward with polite chatter, just a nod steady and silent. The door opened at the perfect moment, her reflection catching the briefest hint of his half-smile. There, then gone. Inside the car, she adjusted her lipstick in the mirror, pretending indifference. "So, Danielle," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Do all your clients keep you this busy?" "Some more than others," he replied, his tone mild. "I bet most of them try to talk your ear off." "Most of them try," he said, and glanced at her through the rearview mirror. Their eyes met, just long enough for her pulse to skip. Something in his gaze felt deliberate, almost assessing. For the first time, Samantha felt like the one being observed. She turned to the window, hiding her smirk. Two could play this game. As the car rolled through the city, she dropped small tests like pebbles into water, asking him to take unfamiliar streets, requesting her favorite coffee from a hidden cafe she'd never mentioned aloud. Each time, Daniel anticipated it before she finished speaking. At the cafe, he returned with her exact order: half sweet, oat milk, no foam, without needing correction. She narrowed her eyes. "How did you—" "You strike me as someone who likes control, not surprises," he said. "That order suits both." The response disarmed her more than she cared to admit. She sipped quietly, watching the city pass, wondering how a man she'd met hours ago seemed to know her rhythms better than most people she'd known for years. At a stoplight, she caught his reflection again. Calm face, focused eyes. But there was something beneath that calm and edge, a history she couldn't read. He adjusted the route without checking the GPS. "Shortcut," he murmured. "You know this area? Better than you think?" The way he said it made her skin prickle. She wanted to ask more, but pride kept her quiet. When he finally pulled up to her penthouse, she waited for him to open the door. He did, right on cue, rain beginning to mist around them. "Thank you, Daniel." He nodded once, gaze level. "Until tomorrow, Ms. Cole." The formality stung slightly, though she didn't understand why. As the elevator doors closed, Samantha caught her reflection, poised, perfect, untouchable. Yet somewhere deep inside, she knew the balance had shifted. She wasn't driving this game anymore. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers, laughter, and the perfume of wealth. Samantha Cole moved through it like she owned the night, because she did. Her company's new fragrance line had just broken sales records, and every pair of eyes seemed fixed on her sequined dress and practiced smile. Yet, beneath the music and chatter, her thoughts drifted toward the man standing quietly near the entrance. Black suit crisp, posture precise, Daniel Reed. He wasn't supposed to stand out, but somehow he did. While her colleagues toasted champagne and whispered gossip, Daniel waited beside the car keys, detached but watchful. When Samantha's friend leaned close and said, "Your driver looks more like a bodyguard," Samantha laughed, but it came out too quickly. "He's just very professional," she replied. Still, her gaze found him again, tracking the subtle way he surveyed the crowd as though measuring exits, memorizing faces. Later, when she stepped outside for air, she heard him behind the car, voice low, speaking fluent French into his phone. Not the halting accent of a hobbyist, but the smooth fluency of someone educated or trained. She froze behind a marble column. "Oui, je comprends." "No, she doesn't suspect a thing," he said, before pausing, sensing movement. The words made her breath hitch. When he turned, the call ended. "Everything all right, Miss Cole?" he asked evenly, as if nothing had happened. "Fine," she said too fast, smoothing her hair to hide the tremor in her hands. Who was he speaking to? A friend? A spy? The idea seemed ridiculous, yet so did his composure. Most employees tripped over themselves in her presence. Daniel seemed almost bored by her power. The drive back should have been quiet, but as the car pulled from the hotel, flashbulbs erupted, paparazzi flooding the road. "How did they even know I'd be here?" she snapped, panic rising. Daniel didn't answer. He reversed once, cut left down a narrow delivery lane, tires whispering over wet cobblestones. "Hold on," he said calmly. Within seconds the noise faded. The maze of back streets swallowed them. Samantha stared out the window, disoriented. "You knew these routes?" "Portland's old districts haven't changed much," he said, "if you know where to look." When they finally reached her penthouse, she turned to him, trying to mask curiosity with irritation. "You seem to know a lot of things a driver shouldn't." He looked at her through the partition mirror, that same unreadable half-smile flickering. "And you seem to ask questions you don't really want answered." For a heartbeat, neither spoke. The city lights washed over them, reflections overlapping, her glitter, his shadow. She realized then that for all her games, she'd entered one she didn't design. She hired a driver, but found a man who seemed to know her world too well, and suddenly she wasn't sure whose car she was really sitting in. The rain that had threatened all day finally began to fall, streaking the penthouse windows with silver lines. Samantha stood before the glass, phone in hand, her reflection shifting between confidence and indecision. She'd been pacing for 10 minutes, debating something she would never normally do. Then, without another thought, she typed, "Dinner. 8 p.m. my treat. Consider it a loyalty check." She hit send before she could overthink it. When Daniel arrived, his expression revealed neither surprise nor amusement. He stood in the doorway, coat still damp, eyes steady. "A loyalty check?" he repeated. Samantha smiled, crossing one leg over the other like she owned the moment. "You passed the driving test. I thought I'd see how you handle conversation." He hesitated just long enough for her confidence to waver. "All right," he said finally, "but only if you promise not to test me again tonight." The words, quiet and calm, hit harder than any flirtation she'd ever used. She gestured toward the table. "No promises," she said lightly, though her pulse betrayed her. Dinner was a simple affair: pasta, wine, soft jazz humming in the background. The candlelight carved warm edges into Daniel's face, making him look less like an employee, more like someone who had stories she wasn't allowed to hear. Their small talk flowed easily at first. Traffic, travel, trivial things, but under the surface, something else built, a rhythm of challenge and surrender neither wanted to name. "You're not what I expected in a chauffeur," she said finally, swirling her wine. "And you're not what I expected in a CEO. Meaning?" "You listen," he said. "Even when you pretend you don't." It wasn't flirtation. It was observation, precise and unsettling. Samantha leaned back, the candle flame flickering between them. "Maybe I just like keeping people guessing." "Or maybe," he said, setting down his fork, "you do it so no one gets close enough to see you." Her laugh came automatically, the kind that covered nerves. "Careful, Daniel. You're venturing into dangerous territory." "I've been there before," he said quietly. Something in his tone pulled the air out of the room. For a long moment neither moved. Then she stood, gathering the plates, needing to break the tension. "Coffee?" He rose too, helping her without being asked. Their hands brushed once, accidentally, but not entirely. The charge of that single touch lingered long after he left. When she returned to the table, the candle had burned low. On her empty wine glass lay a folded napkin. His handwriting was sharp, deliberate. "You test people to feel safe. But safety isn't what you need." She stared at the words, heart thudding. For years, she'd worn her charm like armor, disarming others before they could see her weakness. But this note pierced straight through. She laughed softly, though there was no humor in it. Somehow, his honesty felt more intimate than any compliment ever had. The morning unfolded like any other, Samantha leaving the office surrounded by flashing bulbs and murmured compliments. But beneath the polished routine, something felt off. Her assistant's nervous glances, the sudden calls she didn't answer, the way security whispered into earpieces. She brushed it aside. In her world, rumors were currency, and she'd learned to outsmile scandal. Then, as Daniel pulled the car into the main street, the crowd appeared. Reporters, dozens of them, poured from nowhere, cameras blinding, voices overlapping. "Ms. Cole, is it true the merger collapsed because of you? Did your ex leak the photos?" The noise hit like a wave. "Drive," she ordered, but traffic boxed them in. Her guards froze, caught between protocol and panic. Before she could speak again, Daniel moved. The calm in his posture evaporated into sharp precision. Door unlocked, engine shifted, gear slammed. The car jerked sideways into a narrow service alley she hadn't even noticed. "Hold on," he said, eyes scanning mirrors. His voice was steel wrapped in calm. The rear wheels splashed through puddles, tires slicing the wet pavement as he threaded through impossibly tight turns. She pressed a hand to the seat, stunned. Where are we going? Somewhere they won't follow. The chase lasted minutes but felt like hours. They slipped through half-open gates, over cracked asphalt, and into an abandoned warehouse district on the city's edge. When the engine finally idled, the silence roared louder than the cameras. Samantha's heartbeat thundered in her ears. How could you even know these streets? Daniel turned toward her, breath even, gaze unwavering. Because I've had to lose people faster than this. She stared at him, confusion twisting with awe. His hands, steady, unshaken, rested on the wheel like they were built for command, not service. You're not just a driver. He met her eyes, the faintest trace of something haunted beneath his calm. No, I used to work for people who didn't survive attention like this. The words hit harder than any confession. She imagined bodyguards, politicians, maybe soldiers, people trapped under pressure until something went wrong. Do you lose them? She asked softly. He looked away, the answer already in his silence. Let's just say I learned what protection really costs. For a long moment neither spoke. The rain outside softened to a whisper. Samantha realized her fingers still clutched his sleeve, holding on to him like he was the only steady thing left in a world spinning too fast. When she finally released him, he started the car again, guiding it through the shadows. Not once did he look back, but she did, watching the warehouse fade behind them, feeling the tremor of her own breath. That was the first moment she realized Daniel wasn't just driving her car. He was steering her life, away from danger, yes, but also away from the illusion of control she'd always clung to, and for reasons she couldn't explain, that terrified her more than the cameras ever could. The next morning, Daniel didn't show up. No message, no call, no familiar hum of the engine waiting below the lobby. For someone who'd been as precise as a clock, his absence struck like silence after music. Samantha tried to brush it off. Drivers quit, people moved on, but a knot of unease coiled tighter with every passing hour. By noon, her assistant handed her a sealed envelope. It was dropped off early, she said, but the handwriting on the front wasn't Daniel's. Inside, a single card bore a name and number, Maria Holt, private security consultant. The kind of contact usually whispered, not written. Samantha hesitated before dialing. The woman's voice on the other end was calm, clipped, with the faint rasp of someone who'd seen too much. "You're looking for Daniel Reed," she said, before Samantha could introduce herself. "He's not easy to find." "I'm not trying to hire him," Samantha replied quickly. "I just need to know if he's all right." A pause. Then, "Depends what you call all right." He left the field years ago after a job went wrong, a protection mission overseas. VIP client, political family. They didn't make it. Daniel barely did. The words chilled her. She thought of the scar across his knuckle, the way his eyes sharpened at the mention of danger. So he was military? Close enough, Maria said. After that, he walked away. Drove for quiet people. Stayed out of sight. Samantha's throat tightened. All her teasing, her games, she had prodded at a man who'd already carried too much. Did he tell you why he left? He said something once, Maria answered softly. You can protect the body, but not the heart. I think that's why he drives. Safer behind glass, watching someone else move through the world. The call ended, leaving Samantha staring out across the city, feeling the kind of ache that didn't fit into headlines. The rain had returned, blurring the skyline like tears she wouldn't let fall. She walked to her desk, pulled open the drawer, and found the napkin he'd left days ago. You test people to feel safe, but safety isn't what you need. She ran her finger over the ink, realizing now that he'd seen her more clearly than anyone ever had. Her charm, her wit, the endless flirting. They were all shields built from loneliness. He'd known it instantly and still stayed long enough to show her what real steadiness felt like. For the first time in years, the flirty CEO couldn't laugh her emptiness away. The penthouse, usually her sanctuary of glass and gold, suddenly felt hollow. Every sound echoed, her heels on marble, the distant hum of the city below. She closed her eyes and whispered into the quiet. "You were right, Daniel. Safety was never the point." Outside, thunder rolled across the skyline, low and distant. Somewhere out there, he was still driving, still hiding from ghosts she'd only begun to understand. A full week passed before anything broke the silence. Samantha buried herself in work, filling every minute with meetings, travel plans, and noise, anything to drown out the quiet absence that followed her like a shadow. Then one evening, a plain white envelope slid under her penthouse door. No return address, no markings, only her name written in deliberate, slanted handwriting she recognized instantly. Inside was a single card. "If you still want the truth, come alone." Beneath the words an address. No signature, yet his presence filled every letter. Her first instinct was to ignore it, to pretend curiosity didn't pulse through her veins like an electric current. But by the time the city lights dimmed, Samantha found herself behind the wheel of her own car, a rare act of rebellion. The GPS marked a route north out of Portland, where the highways narrowed and trees pressed closer against the road. Each turn took her further from her world of cameras and marble floors, deeper into something that felt like a story she wasn't writing. The forest thickened, branches arching overhead like a canopy of secrets. When she finally reached the iron gates, her headlights caught the outline of a mansion beyond. Stone, vast, and silent. She hesitated, heart pounding, until the gates swung open on their own. A figure waited near the entrance, standing in the wash of her headlights. Daniel. But not the Daniel she knew. Gone was the tailored uniform, the quiet restraint. He wore a black shirt, open at the collar, sleeves rolled, posture relaxed yet commanding. The man she'd teased, tested, tried to outsmart, now looked like someone she'd never had power over to begin with. She stepped out slowly, the cool night air cutting through her composure. "You have a strange way of quitting a job," she said, trying for humor, but her voice wavered. He smiled faintly, that familiar half-curve of lips. "I never quit," he said. "I was just waiting for you to come to the right address." Her gaze swept over the mansion, the gravel drive, the antique lanterns flickering along the path. "This place yours?" He nodded once. "My father's estate." "I haven't used it in years, so you're—" "What, my driver/heir to an empire?" "Just a man who stopped pretending to be less than he is," he said quietly. "And maybe showing you what happens when you stop pretending too." Samantha crossed her arms, but the gesture lacked conviction. Every instinct told her to turn back, yet her feet refused. There was something magnetic in the stillness between them, an invisible thread pulling her closer. He stepped aside, gesturing toward the open doors. "Come in, Samantha. You've been leading long enough. Tonight, learn what it means to follow." The words settled over her like both a challenge and a promise. She walked past him, each step echoing against the marble floor, heart pounding as the doors closed behind them. The man she'd hired was about to teach her what it truly meant to follow. The mansion's interior glowed with muted amber light, the kind that made shadows feel alive. Samantha followed Daniel through long corridors lined with portraits, each one staring down with the kind of judgment only memory could carry. The air smelled faintly of cedar and dust, like something sacred had been locked away. He led her into a study filled with books and silence. A single photograph rested on the desk, a young woman with dark hair and bright eyes, smiling beside a classic car. Samantha's gaze lingered on it until Daniel spoke. "Her name was Clara," he said softly. "We were engaged." The stillness that followed was heavy, broken only by the soft crackle of the fireplace. "What happened?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. He drew a slow breath. "We were driving to the coast. It started raining, visibility low. A truck crossed the median. I lost control. His eyes didn't meet hers. I woke up 3 days later. She didn't. Samantha's throat tightened. The pain in his voice wasn't raw. It was old, worn smooth by time, but still sharp enough to cut. "I'm sorry," she murmured, meaning it more than she expected. "I left this house after that," he continued, his tone steady. "I couldn't stand the quiet. The halls reminded me of every plan we never lived, so I drove. At first to escape, then because it was the only thing that kept me steady." She moved closer, her heels silent on the carpet. "And me?" she asked, trying to disguise the tremor in her voice. "Why take a job driving for me?" Daniel looked up finally, eyes steady but tired. "'Cause I saw something familiar. You laugh when you should cry. You test people so they won't leave first. I wanted to see if someone with everything could still feel." The words landed with quiet force. Samantha folded her arms as if to defend herself, but the armor didn't fit anymore. "You think I don't feel?" "I think you feel too much," he said. "You just hide it better than most." The truth hit her harder than any flirtation ever had. She thought back to every careless remark, every test she'd set like traps, when really they'd been reflections of her own fear. She turned toward the window, the forest outside whispering in the wind. "So this was never about me hiring you," she said slowly. "You found me." "Maybe," he admitted. "Or maybe we found each other exactly where we were supposed to." When she looked back, the light from the fire caught the edge of his profile, half in shadow, half in gold. He hadn't been pretending to serve her. He'd been waiting for her to see him, to recognize in him the same ache that haunted her. For the first time, Samantha didn't feel like the powerful one. She felt human, seen, stripped of every mask she'd ever worn, and it was terrifyingly beautiful. The rain had started again, a gentle rhythm against the tall library windows. Shelves of old books surrounded them, the kind bound in leather and time, whispering stories of people who'd lived and lost before. The fire burned low, throwing soft light over Samantha's face. She sat in silence, fingers tracing the rim of a porcelain cup. Daniel stood across from her, patient as ever. He hadn't said much since his confession, and that stillness made her uneasy. Her world had always been built on movement, talking, planning, controlling, but here, with him, silence demanded honesty. "You really believe I test people to feel safe?" she asked finally, her tone half a challenge, half a plea. Daniel didn't flinch. "I think you flirt to keep distance. You turn every truth into a joke before it can touch you." The remark should have annoyed her. Instead, it disarmed her. Samantha set the cup down and exhaled, the sound breaking something fragile in the air. "Do you know what it's like to have everyone want something from you? Your approval, your name, your brand. Flirting is easier. It's control. It's pretending I choose who gets close." He stepped nearer, not threatening, just steady. "Control isn't strength, Samantha. It's armor. You can't live inside it forever." Her laugh came out brittle. "And what would you know about control?" "I used it to survive," he said quietly, "until I realized it kept me just as alone as fear does." The words sank deep. She looked up at him, seeing not a driver or a savior, but a man who carried his own broken edges with grace. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I don't even know who I am without it." "You're someone who still shows up," Daniel said. "Someone who's brave enough to ask questions like that." She wanted to say, "I'm falling for you." The words pressed against her throat but refused to leave. Instead, she said, "You make it sound easy." "It isn't," he replied. "That's why it matters." The silence that followed was warm this time, not heavy. Daniel moved to the tea tray and poured her another cup, the gesture simple, grounding. He placed it in front of her and added quietly, "When you're ready, drive." She frowned, confused for a second, then understood the metaphor. He wasn't talking about cars. He was giving her something she'd never offered anyone else, choice. "For once," she murmured, smiling faintly through the sting in her eyes. "The driver gave me the keys, and I don't know where to go." Daniel smiled too, that rare, unguarded expression that melted the last bit of distance between them. "Then start with somewhere real," he said. She lifted the cup, her hands trembling just slightly. For the first time in her adult life, Samantha Cole wasn't performing. She wasn't flirting or deflecting. She was simply there, seen, vulnerable, unmasked, and somehow that felt like the strongest thing she'd ever done. The next morning, Samantha woke to the shrill vibration of her phone, dozens of alerts lighting up the screen. At first, she ignored them, assuming another press update or congratulatory message from the night before. But when she finally glanced down, her stomach turned cold. Headlines screamed across every tabloid site. Flirty CEO's secret night at Mystery Mansion. Below, photos of her stepping through Daniel's gate under moonlight, her expression unreadable. Zoomed, cropped, dissected. She sat up, the air thinning around her. The internet had already built its own story, a scandalous affair, a hidden man, betrayal of her company's image. Within minutes, her phone rang again, her board's emergency call. "Samantha." Her CFO's voice trembled between concern and accusation. "We need a statement. Investors are calling." "Who is this man?" "He's—" She stopped herself. What was he now? A driver, a friend? Something she had no word for? "He's nobody," she lied, voice sharp. "I'll handle it." The call ended, but the damage was already unraveling her carefully built empire. Her PR team demanded a response. Reporters swarmed her building. Only one thought cut through the chaos. Daniel. She dialed his number again and again. Disconnected. She sent a driver to the mansion. "No one's there," he reported. "Looks abandoned." Samantha's pulse pounded. "He set me up." The thought came unbidden, cruel, but impossible to silence. Who else could have leaked it? He'd invited her, knowing what a single photograph could do. Rage burned where hurt wanted to live. Within an hour, she was in her car, driving herself, foot heavy, hands trembling, back toward the forest road. The same turns she'd taken under moonlight now felt alien, colder, as if the trees themselves had closed ranks against her. When the gates came into view, they were ajar. She stepped out, heels sinking into wet gravel, calling his name. "Daniel!" Only her voice answered, echoing through the still air. Inside, the mansion was hollow, furniture covered, dust gathering where light once fell. The fire that had burned warm last night was gone, leaving only faint traces of ash. Her hand shook as she found the study, the photo of his fiancée still on the desk. But next to it now sat something new, a folded sheet of paper. She opened it. "I told you once that safety wasn't what you needed." "I meant it." "This place isn't safe for you now. Leave before they turn you into a headline again." No signature, no goodbye. Samantha sank into the chair, tears stinging though she refused to let them fall. Every wall of confidence, every layer of poise she'd built, cracked open. "You promised not to run," she whispered into the emptiness. Outside, thunder rolled, low and distant, the same sound that had marked their first meeting. Only now she understood. She had tested him with doubt, and fate had tested her back with loss. The mansion, once full of revelation, now stood like a monument to everything she'd broken by not believing. Weeks slipped by, measured not by headlines but by silence. The scandal cooled, the board forgave, and Samantha Cole returned to work with her signature poise. Her statements were crisp, her posture flawless, her laughter at events perfectly timed. To the world she looked untouched, unbothered, indestructible. But when the lights dimmed and the crowds vanished, her reflection told another story, tired eyes and an ache that refused to leave. She had recovered her reputation, yet lost something irreplaceable in the process. Daniel's absence lingered like a song that ended too soon. Each night, she found herself glancing at her phone, half expecting a message that never came. Eventually, even her assistant stopped asking if she was all right. One stormy Friday, unable to bear the weight of another empty night, Samantha grabbed her keys and drove. No destination, no purpose, just the hum of the engine and the sound of rain tracing patterns across the windshield. The city lights faded behind her, replaced by winding roads and dark trees that whispered of forgotten places. She didn't realize how far she'd gone until the ocean appeared. A wide, grey expanse stretching toward the horizon. The road curved along the cliffs, slick with rain. That's when the dashboard lights flickered and the car coughed once before dying completely. "Of course," she muttered, slamming the steering wheel. Cold wind poured through the cracked window, carrying the scent of salt and storm. She stepped out, rain drenching her hair, and kicked the tire in frustration. "Perfect!" Then came a voice from behind her, low and familiar. "You finally learned to drive yourself," she froze. Slowly, she turned. Through the mist, Daniel stood a few paces away, his coat dark with rain, his expression calm but warm. For a heartbeat, she thought she was dreaming. "Daniel," he smiled faintly, "you always said you wanted control. I figured it was time you took the wheel for real." Tears blurred her vision before she could stop them. "Where did you go? Why did you just disappear?" "I didn't disappear," he said. "I stepped back. The media was circling you, tearing through everything. If I stayed, it would have destroyed you." Samantha shook her head, rain streaking down her face. "You think leaving didn't?" Daniel's eyes softened. "I had to do something better than hide. Come with me," he gestured toward a small lane leading inland. She followed, unsure why, until the trees opened into a clearing. The mansion stood there, but transformed. The gates now bore a new sign: the Clara Home for children without families. Through the windows, she saw light and laughter, kids playing, volunteers moving through hallways once filled with ghosts. "I sold half the property," Daniel said quietly. "Turned the rest into something useful. I figured love shouldn't just heal us, it should build something for others." Samantha stared, overwhelmed. All this time, he hadn't been hiding from her. He'd been building something for them. Rain misted around them, turning the world soft and silver. The roar of the ocean faded behind as Samantha stood by the car, staring at Daniel through the falling water. For a long time, neither spoke. Everything that needed to be said hung between them. The anger, the longing, the months of silence that had carved space where words once lived. "You should have told me," she said at last, voice breaking between accusation and relief. "I know," Daniel replied, stepping closer, "but I needed you to find your own way first. You had to drive without me before we could drive together." The echo of his words, the metaphor he'd used once before, cracked something open inside her. The tension that had built through months of fear and pride finally slipped away, washed clean by rain. "I was angry," she admitted, tears mingling with raindrops. "Not because of the photos, not even because you left. I was angry that you saw me before I was ready to be seen." Daniel reached into his pocket and drew out 2 keys. One was hers, the other new and shining beneath the stormlight. He pressed it into her palm. "Not a gift," he said quietly. "A promise. We start equal this time." Samantha looked down at the keys, the metal cold and solid against her skin. "I don't need a promise," she whispered. "I just need you to stay." He smiled faintly. "Then stay with me." For a moment, the only sound was the rain tapping against the car roof. She stepped forward, wrapping her arms around him, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath soaked fabric. There were no titles now, no masks, just 2 people standing in the middle of nowhere, deciding that love didn't need to be perfect to be real. When they finally pulled apart, Daniel opened the passenger door and nodded toward it. "You drove here?" he said. "So let me drive us home." Samantha hesitated, then handed him her keys. "Only if I get to pick the music." His quiet laugh cut through the rain like sunlight. "Deal!" They climbed inside, the world outside blurring into streaks of silver as the wipers swept rhythmically. The headlights carved a path through the mist, two beams of light weaving their way back toward the city. Neither spoke much. There was comfort in the quiet, in knowing that silence no longer meant distance. As the car rolled along the coastal highway, Samantha rested her head against the seat, watching droplets race across the window. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel the urge to test, to challenge, to win. She just breathed. Trusted. The rain grew heavier, drumming gently against the roof, the same sound that had marked their beginning. But this time, there was no loneliness in it, only peace. She glanced at Daniel, his hands steady on the wheel, and smiled. This time, she thought, she wasn't testing love, she was trusting it. And together, through rain and reflection, they drove home.